Hello, my name is Ishmael Houston-Jones. I'm a dance maker from New York City. I'm here in Berlin at the Hebel Theater at Hal 2, doing a piece called Them, which is a reconstruction of a piece that I made with the writer Dennis Cooper and composer Chris Cochrane in 1986.
They're over there in the table, in the background. Yeah, thank you very much for accepting this interview. And could you tell us a little bit more about, why this reconstruction, or this reinterpretation also, I would say, and to give a little bit of context about why.
The piece was, as I said, was made in 1986. I was asked by Performance Space 122 in New York, where it was originally performed, if I had a piece. They're doing a lot of retrospectives now because they're tearing down their old theater and making a new theater. So they asked me if I wanted to do something that I'd done there in the past, and I felt that this piece was one of three major collaborations I did with Dennis Cooper. It was the first, and it didn't get seen by a lot of people. It ran for 2 weekends in 1986, and that's all the people who had ever seen the piece. Wow. And I thought it was a really good piece, and Dennis has since moved to Paris, so I don't see him every day anymore, or very often, so it was a good opportunity for us to get together. And Chris and I still live in New York, but we don't see each other that much either, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to rethink this piece. And since the piece was made in a very particular time, that it would be interesting to see how the piece would read 25 years later. Well, part of the piece, there was an original sketch of the piece was made in 1985. And it was mainly connected to, I had heard, Dennis had just moved to New York City. And I'd heard of him, but I hadn't read his books yet. And I went to hear him read, and his writing I thought was so powerful. It was very brutal, but very emotional, and it just touched me really deeply. It was a piece about a serial killer, I believe. But it was seen, as the serial killing is seen by the killer, by the victim, and by God. And I had not heard, and also just sort of his style of writing. And I write myself, and I've written texts for my own pieces, but I really wanted to work with him, and I just went up to him and asked him if he'd worked with a dancer, and he said he hadn't before, but he was interested. And then I heard Chris playing at a club, I believe it was Club 8BC, which is a very sort of punk, hard rock, hardcore kind of club, and it was more of his posture of how he was relating to his guitar, how he was hunched over and just making these incredible sounds come out of it. That I really, I asked him the same question, if he would work with me, and the three of us worked together. None of us sort of knew each other at that point, and we just got together and began working with another dancer and an actor. Well, based on Dennis, what I was saying was based on Dennis's writing. The piece was about sort of young male sexuality and how young males sometimes relate to each other, sometimes violently, sometimes tenderly. And also, after we did the sketch, the presenter, Mark Russell at Performance Space 122, asked us if we wanted to develop that sketch into a fully big piece. And as we were developing it, we decided it was 1986 then, and to have a piece that was about male bonding, male sexuality, male violence, and to not have any reference to AIDS the piece was not about AIDS, but to have no reference to that would be odd and weird. So we added, most of what we added was the last part of the piece, which was sort of an AIDS coda.
After the beating,
after the chasing. The chasing was in the original, the fag bashing chasing was in the original, and the mattress loop was in the original, where they push each other down and pull each other up repeatedly over and over again. But after that, the thing with the dance with the animal corpse was new. The lymph node dance was new. It's a direct reference. It's a direct reference, but I think it's like obscure enough that it's not, like the AIDS is never mentioned in any of the texts of the piece. So we wanted to have some reference to that, and I think that refers now. And also the violence, anti-gay violence is still very relevant. And AIDS is still relevant. It's sort of like been pushed to the back of people's consciousness, but it's still here. And if you're not in the developing world...
It's more endemic than epidemic.
Yes. And if you're not in the developing world where you can afford really expensive drugs, it's huge. It's huge in place. Creating this piece or reimagining it, it was important to keep sort of the emotional core of it more than the exact... I mean, the piece is not that different from the 1986 version. There's this piece in the beginning with me, obviously,
that is,
sort of passing the sort of piece on to the younger generation. But the piece isn't that different, but what was really important was that it would have an emotional resonance with an audience and an emotional connection.
Yeah.
And I think that was more important than sort of the historization of the piece. I come out of a strong improvisational background. I was never a strong technician in terms of modern dance or ballet or jazz. The one and only company I danced with was a Wigman-derived company. It was German immigrants actually, who came to Philadelphia where I was living and formed a company, and it was based on sort of Wigman technique. But I was always attracted to the improvisational aspect of that. And as time went on, I began to explore many different forms of improvisation. I was an actor before I was a dancer, so there are theater improvisations that I've done. And then I got really involved in the contact improvisation movement, and that sort of has informed my work a lot. And by the 80s, I was beginning to resist sort of the canon of contact improvisation. And my friend Fred Holland and I did a contact piece in the presence of Steve Paxton, which was risky, where we did everything wrong, but we were still doing contact improvisation. And then the first thing we did wrong was that we were black, since contact was a very white university-held form. And then we did it with loud music and with our clothes and with heavy street shoes on, and talked and stayed out of physical contact as much as possible. So I was always sort of contrarian to the canon. And this piece, I think what is different and what doesn't get recognized in this piece is that there's no set choreography in the piece. It's an hour-long piece with no set choreography. Because I didn't want the dancers to embody me. I didn't want them to be replicants of me. I wanted them to find their own way into the work. And that was very important for me. So I give them scores, ideas, emotional touchstones. Obviously the music gives them ideas. And there are staging ideas, left, right, up, down. But the movement they're coming up with is their movement on their own. I wasn't sure if Dennis was going to be able to come over from Paris or if we would have an actor read the text. And we decided that was not going to work. And we decided it was sort of necessary to have me in the piece as well, in some form. So I'm not sure. I don't know if the piece has a life beyond the lives of the three of us.
The personal biographies.
I mean, it could be done like it was originally. I don't know. I've given other pieces of mine, since my pieces are all improvised. The movement is improvised, so I have, in fact, given my pieces away as different pieces, mostly solos I've done. There's one called Without Hope that several people have done, and there's another that's a solo that involves other people from the outside directing the dancer under very specific rules. It has a very long title, Eyes, Mouth, and All the Rest, Surrendering to the Desires of Others. And many people have done that piece. But I'm not sure, because this piece has 3 authors that are all entwined, so I don't know if Chris would give the score of the music or Dennis would give the text. That's sort of doubtful that would happen.
Or really the context,
I know. We performed it in Canada, France, Holland, and now Germany. And it's been well received in all of those places. Perhaps not in Canada. Canada was 1988, so it was sort of people walked out a lot. That the animal carcass and the loud music, I think, mostly seemed to be driving them out. But in France and Holland now, and this year and last year, in France and in Holland and here in Germany, the reception seems to be really attentive and caring.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the kind of piece you want to stand up and cheer about necessarily.
Yeah.
It's sort of I've been looking back at other pieces also, thinking about, because, you know, in the sort of East Village, New York downtown scene that I was involved with in the 80s and 90s, pieces had like usually a 3 or 4 day life. And maybe you would tour some 1 or 2 other places, and that was it. And those people of my generation sort of accepted that, okay, you know, we're going to do this piece, and, you know, 50 of our friends, or 100 of our friends, or 200 friends, and then maybe we get to go 1 or 2 other cities, and the pieces would die, or they'd be on videotape. And it sort of made me think about sort of like my trajectory and like what was interesting in the past. And people keep saying they want something new for me. I mean, I myself, but I'm sort of interested in like going back and seeing, because I think there was a lot of work that was really good, and deserves a new seeing, a new viewing. And, you know, I will maybe make something else. I'm also I've always been a writer, and I'm interested in writing. So, and as my body changes with age, I'm not that interested in doing things. I don't set work, so it's sort of like I make structures, so I could continue doing that. But it seems like my body doesn't move the same way, and I'm interested in that also, the aging process. All kinds of people are looking back. I think the 80s was a very fertile time. And visual art and choreography and dance and literature, definitely in visual art, and that things were happening then, and I think people are sort of rediscovering the 80s as not in terms of cap, but in terms of like the real vitality of the art scene.